theories of ethics. In the course of explaining lecture 1 and 2, we've already hinted on these theories of ethics. But as a formality, we still have to go through them and see what they are. Okay. So they are basically we have three main theoretical frameworks as far as ethics is concerned. So we have deontology, a branch of ethics dealing with duties and principles. If you remember our somewhere in the discussion, I told you that there are some things that's based on natural law. It's kind of a duty, and it's not based on what you get. You are supposed not to kill, and it is not subject to any other consequences or condition. So when you have a duty to do that which is right, or not to do something, it falls within what is known as deontology, the deontological theory of ethics. Okay, and we also discuss instances where consequences or outcomes of your decision will determine whether to be ethical or not ethical. And that falls under consequentialism theory of ethics. Okay. Then finally, we looked at virtues. You remember values and virtues. So it focused on the individual character and motivation for action. So this time around, we are not looking at whether it's a duty or consequences or outcomes. We're basically looking at the person and whether the person has the character and motivation to do what is right. Okay. So that is the main thrust. Deontology is generally understood to be the theory or the study of moral obligation. The ethical philosophy that believes that an action's value is determined by its conformance to some binding law rather than by its results is known as deontology. So you have a duty to do something and you have done it. You have to do it not because it will bring any positive outcomes or negative outcomes. You just have a duty to do what is required of you. Okay, so that's one way to view ethics and ethical behavior. Under deontology, we have two types. We have act deontology and we have rule deontology. Okay, so those that believe in the act deontology contend that a person's overt behavior, which ought to be based on justice, fairness, benevolence, equity, and kindness, must reveal his or a level of ethics. So with act deontology, it's about your behavior. Okay, but the behavior here is qualified. It should have these positive values. It should have the traits of justice, fairness, and all the positive values that we've discussed earlier. Once you put up a behavior that meets up with this universal values or virtues, then you are deemed to have behaved ethically. Okay. So act deontologists point out that deontological rules simply serve as recommendations. So based on the perspective of act deontology, if I was to act justly, fairly, with benevolence and equity, it doesn't matter if there was any rule that I acted against. What is important is that I did something that conformed with universal norms and practices. And the rules by themselves are just mere recommendations. So if the rule that I'm supposed to obey is not just, it's not fair, it doesn't exhibit benevolence and equity, then probably from the perspective of act deontology, I will be right not to have obeyed that particular rule, but simply to put up a behavior that goes with the principles of justice, fairness, benevolence, and all the virtues and values that we spoke about. So rules, norms, regulations are merely there to serve as recommendations, and that my actual behavior, what I do or don't do, will be the basis to find out whether I've acted ethically or not. All right. Then we have the rule deontology. So they think that while people are making decisions, they should abide by specific moral laws. So with rule deontology, their emphasis is on obeying some moral laws or some rules, moral rules. Okay, so it is not too different from the earlier one. The earlier one assumes that it is your act, and they believe that the rules that will be recommending those acts will be moral. But the emphasis is on what you have actually done. And if what you have done is just is fair, it is equitable, then all things being equal, the rule that govern that particular act should have reflected that type of behavior. Okay, so if the rule is not reflecting, there is something actually wrong with the rule and not your behavior. The rule deontology is emphasizing the same idea, but this time around from the perspective of the law. All right. So laws are supposed to be moral laws, and your decisions will be made, whatever your ethical behavior will be judged based on how well you have conformed with moral laws. Okay. So to govern people's behavior, these laws are constructed on the basis of moral and logical concepts. So if you don't obey them, then you are in trouble, because the assumption is that the laws or the rules are based on logical and moral concepts. Okay. The difficulty is where the rules themselves are not moral or they are not based on logical concepts. And if you read LLB, there is a whole subject or course on that. That is very, very confusing. Okay, so if there is a law of a particular state that gives you the right, yes. Hello? I thought somebody was calling. So if there is a right, for example, during the attempt to eliminate Jews or any of those kind of era where you have the right to kill some tribe or some people, it could be a national law that gives you the right to kill. All right. But the question is whether that particular law is moral, whether it is logical to have such a law. Okay. So rule deontology emphasizes obedience of moral laws, and then act deontology emphasizes or focuses on your overt behavior, the actual behavior that you put up. That will determine whether what you do is ethical or not. But don't forget the main thrust of deontology. Deontology says people have a duty to act in a certain way or not to act. Okay, it's not based on consequences. So if we go back to our lecture one, the example that was given about having sex, for example, before marriage or what do you call it? Adultery. Okay. If I was to ask you the benefits of sex, I'm sure I'll get like 10 of them. Can I try that? The ladies, Esther, can you give us some benefits of sex? Hello? Esther?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm
What
here.
are the benefits of sex?
You feel satisfied?
What kind of satisfaction?
Let me say, your question came like something. We have to wait. Let me. Inner satisfaction. Yes.
Inner satisfaction. Clarify. Be more specific.
Oh.
Justina, do you know what we are talking about?
Yes, sir.
What are the benefits?
It's a therapy.
Who is laughing with macho voice like that?
Therapy,
Hey, what kind of adjectives are this? Okay, so this inner satisfaction, this therapy, it doesn't matter whether the person is your wife or not, whether it's before marriage or after marriage, or within marriage, whenever you do it, there is a tendency that you get that kind of therapy, you get that kind of satisfaction. All right. So if it is based on benefits or outcomes, we can say that anytime that you have sex, you actually have the therapy and you have the enjoyment that goes with that. All right. If it is about negative consequences, science has developed that we can use condoms and other means to prevent whatever. Okay. So my fundamental question is, why would religious texts still instruct us not to have sex? All right. And so you see that moral law of thou shalt not fornicate or thou shalt not commit adultery, it's not subject to your analysis. It's not subject to consequences or outcomes. No matter the benefits it will bring to you, the rule is that once you believe in that, you are supposed not to have sex either before marriage or whatever, extramarital affair. Okay, so that is the idea of deontology. You just have a duty to do something, and you are not doing it based on outcomes or consequences. It's some power somewhere, some authority somewhere that is asking you not to do it. Okay, I hope that is clear. So let's look at the criticisms of this theory. Occasionally, other aspects of a bargain outweigh the narrow sense of duty as compelling. Okay, so that is the main whatever criticism of this particular theory. So you can tell, say for example, I have a duty to teach you guys this weekend, and between a certain period to a certain period. Okay, but whilst here, if I receive a call that my son or any other relative is sick at home, that need to go home and go attend to that particular person becomes far more urgent and important than teaching you guys until I finish the course. Okay, so if you go strictly by deontology, it won't matter if somebody is dying or somebody has collapsed. I have a duty to teach you guys till say 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. And until that I accomplish that duty, I don't have any right to stop teaching until the time has elapsed. Okay, so that's the major criticism. There may be a problem that is far more urgent than the call or the challenge to carry out your duties blindly. Okay, right. So, and earlier on, I gave you the example of security guys, where they are told not to open some gate, whether it's an emergency, there is whatever, what they have heard from their boss is that nobody should pass it. And that can be a problem for people that believe in deontology. Okay. Next, there are instances that demonstrate how Kant's theory of morality is flawed. For instance, a female employee in Iran accepts a reduced pay rate from her employer for performing the same job as a man. Okay, so to deontology, once you're obeying the law, you are ethical. And in Iran, the pay rates are such that there is discrimination. Males or men tend to receive higher pay rates than females. So for the same work that we're doing right now, maybe the male rate may be, say, 100 Ghana cedi per hour. The female may be 70 or 60. And because the employer, for example, UCC, is obeying national law, if they choose to pay me 100 and pay my female colleague 70 cedis, UCC will have deemed to have behaved ethically. Do you get a flaw in that? Okay. So universally, discrimination on the basis of gender is unethical. It is wrong. But once in a particular institution, in a particular country, they have accepted those laws to be their laws, obeying them means that you have behaved ethically. Okay. And that is another criticism for that. So if you find yourself in an area where they accept the fact that we can eat human flesh or they eat human flesh, and you were to join them, you will have deemed to have behaved ethically right. If you were to refuse, you will have been deemed to be unethical. That is how absurd it is. Okay, so just obeying laws means that you are ethical. And earlier I asked the fundamental question, what if the laws by themselves are immoral or they are not moral? That is the weakness with deontology. Okay, then the next point is very close to that. Following your boss's order for your own duties mindlessly is not a desirable behavior. The duties could be unethical or wrong. So based on deontology, once your boss asks you to do something, you have to obey your boss. But the question is, what if what your boss is asking you to do is wrong or unethical? To the deontologist, once you have obeyed your boss, that is ethical. But we know that in real life, that is not the case, okay? Bosses can ask you to do that which is not right. Right, then we'll move to the second major type of theory. It is known as teleological theory, okay? Earlier on, we saw it as consequentialism, but consequentialism is just an aspect of teleological theories. So the major other type of theory is known as teleological theory. So according to teleological views, a decision on an action's moral worth is made purely based on its results. All right. So whether a decision is ethical or not is based on the rewards that we will see or get after the decision. If a decision is made to achieve a specific goal, the action is teleological. All right. And there are two aspects of this type of theory. One based on consequences, known as consequentialism. All right. So we have the teleological school of philosophy, which includes consequentialism. Then we also have utilitarianism approach or type of teleological theory. So as the name suggests, consequentialism is all about consequences. So the focus there is normally about negatives, right? If I do this or if I don't do it, what are the consequences? What are the negative repercussions for not doing something or for doing something? And that is used to determine whether that decision is ethical or not. Utilitarianism is coming from the word utility. And here the focus is on the benefits that will come from a particular decision. Once the benefits outweighs the costs, then we can say that it was an ethical decision. So on a whole, teleological theory is basically based on the results that you get from a particular decision. If the result is positive, then you can go ahead, okay? In terms of either consequences or in terms of utility, then you can go ahead with that particular type of decision, all right? So that is also divided into two. We have the act utilitarianism and we have the rule. So the act holds that a course of action becomes morally right when it produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people, as opposed to the rule utilitarianism, which holds that the morality of a course of action depends on the soundness of the rules that permit it to achieve the greatest good. Okay, so with acts, once I do anything and it will bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people, I've done that which is ethical. Okay, but the rule utilitarianism says that the ethicalness of whatever I've done is based on the soundness of the rule. Okay, how sound is the rule that I behaved? And for a rule to be sound, the rule should be such that it should bring greater good to the greater number of people. Is it confusing? Is it clear? Okay. So if I was driving, all right, if I was driving or you were in a bus, 30-seater bus and you were driving and there was one person trying to cross the road and accidentally just crossed without any signal, the act utilitarianism would support a driver that decided to kill that one person in order to save the life of the 30 passengers that were in the car. Okay? Does that make sense? Because suddenly, if he was to apply the brakes, maybe the car will somersault and kill the 30 people in the car. But if you were to clear the one person, the car could just, there will be small damages, but the impact will not be so strong as trying to stop at that point in time. Does that make sense? I want your views on that.
Yes, please, sir.
Yes, please, sir. Why? Hello? Oh,
Yes, sir.
Hello.
yes. I'm listening.
Yeah, because it's better to save the many people than the only one person.
Okay, so based on act utilitarianism, the number of people you save will be far more than the number of people that you kill. All right. But I always say that it makes sense if you are not the one person that was trying to cross the road. If you are that one person, if you were that, if you were that one person that they had to clear, in order for them to save your life, the mathematics will not make sense to you. Okay. The other example is the Jonah story in the Bible, right? Where they had to throw him in whatever for them to protect themselves, right? So if it is based on deontology, the rule is that thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill. So if because of a sin, all of you will die, all of you should die. Okay? By utilitarianism and whatever consequentialism will look at the benefits. It will be better for one person to die. We don't have an idea of the number of people in the boat. Please, I'm getting some feedback. Like you are in a carpentry shop or something. I'm getting feedback. It's not too nice. Okay. So the Jonah story, yeah. So deontology will say thou shalt not murder. It doesn't matter if all of you will die. Consequentialism and utilitarianism will look at outcomes. It's better for Jonah alone to sink than the entire boat to sink. It makes sense until you are Jonah, okay? Until you are the Jonah who have to sink for the others to be saved. The rule is talking about, so if there is a law that didn't make room for, say, such a disaster, in case you are driving, blah, blah, carrying this number of people, and you meet such a scenario that we just described, all right, then that rule is not considered to be moral based on our interpretation. Okay, so there should be a law, for example, that says if somebody carelessly crosses you and you have more people in your car, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just using this as an example. All right, that is the idea of the rule utilitarianism. Okay, as to utilitarianism, it holds that it is okay to breach a rule as long as it delivers a greater good. This is in contrast with rule utilitarianism, which carries the idea that if a rule cannot result in a greater good, breaking it will not either. Okay, so with act utilitarianism, we are only looking at the consequences, the returns, whether it's positive or negative. Once we do our analysis and find out that the benefits will outweigh the cost, then that decision can be considered to be ethical, even if it results in a breach of a certain law. Okay, criticisms of utilitarianism theory. So given that you cannot maximize two numbers simultaneously, the theory is illogical. All right. So in mass or even in just real life, if you have 10 items and you're sharing it among two people, how many will each get? How many? 5, isn't it? I want feedback.
Yeah, 5.
Right? Yeah. If you increase the number to 10 people with 10 items, how much will you get?
1.
1.
Okay. So it's normally difficult to maximize two numbers simultaneously. All right. One must go up before the other one will go up. If we can increase the number to 20, and we have, say, 5 people, they can now get more of that. But one number must go up. But this theory is saying that you should be able to get 2 numbers to go up simultaneously. Greater good to the greater number of people. Most of the time, the way to provide greater good is when you limit it to few number of people. All right. But if you expand it like free SHS, okay, you will see the kind of problems that you get. All right. So assuming the country, government had decided to say, specialize or concentrate on children of parents in a particular income bracket, just as an example. Okay, and we assume that the number actually gets down to, say, about 200, 300,000 or 300 whatever people. Then the government will be able to do a lot more for such people than opening it up for everybody. Okay, so that is the whole criticism. The more people you're dealing with in terms of goodness, the lesser good you can do to such people. So that theory is illogical in reality. Then the next criticism is that utility is essentially a subjective concept. There is no acceptable definition of good. So the idea of doing good to the greater number of people, the question is, what is good per se? So goodness or good is subjective. What you consider to be good for yourself may be different from another person. Okay? To some people, goodness means more money. To others, goodness means having more time with family. All right? So there are people right now that if they were transferred to another place to become, say, branch managers, where they can receive higher pay, probably company car and all that, they will struggle to take up that opportunity because they feel they will leave their family behind. And here I'm talking more about the female. You remember our care and compassion people. Okay, as for the male, you don't think about that.
Yes, sir.
All right. And there are others also that will go to church and go and give thanks to God, the males, that they have received opportunity for promotion because their discussion and the analysis about goodness is about the salary and the other perks that comes with the position and not family. So the concept goodness is also subjective. So how do you increase good for the majority of people? Okay. Then the last point is very related to good. So the concept of happiness means different things to different people. So it is very difficult to say that you want to make a lot more people happy by being ethical. Please, I'm getting feedback. I've heard tomatoes. Please, mute it. Okay, it was coming from Millicent. Oh. Yes, so the concept of happiness means different things to different people, just as the explanation of my good. All right. So what you mean by happiness could vary from person to person. According to utilitarianism, the end always outweighs the means. In other words, the ends justify the means. So it doesn't really matter if you use dubious means to get the greater good for the greater number of people. Okay, for example, we've heard about cases where somebody might be an armed robber, and after stealing so much, they now go to do charity work. Okay, they either donate to orphanage or they come to the village they were raised up from to build a school or something like that. So will we consider the building of the school to be ethical after destroying the lives of other people? We know about people that deal in drugs, the same idea. Sometimes they do that for society to accept them or as a cover-up for their main activity. Okay, So for utilitarianism, it's about the end and not the means. Once you can do something that will bring greater good, maybe you've been able to build a school for a whole community and you just robbed only 5 households. Which one is greater? You've done greater good to the community. It was just 5 people that you robbed. All right. So that is the logic behind utilitarianism. Utilitarianism does not consider individuals or minorities. That's the point I just established. Okay, so you could be the Jonah that we've thrown into the sea. You could be the passenger that we just knocked, or you could be among the 5 households that we just robbed in order to build a school for a community. We are not after minorities, we are after numbers. Okay. Utilitarianism falls short in one crucial area. Let's say behavior is morally wrong by nature, yet the results are positive. So I just gave you the example. Dealing in drugs, being an armed robber, prostitution, all the negative vices you might think about, all right? It may be morally wrong, but what if it presents or brings positive results? According to this theory, it is still ethical to engage in this type of behavior because the result at the end of the day will be positive. And that is illogical. All right. So let's look at the last one, which is virtue ethics. So the focus is normally on the person's overall character or how they ought to be as a person, sets virtue ethics apart from other ethical principles. So with virtue ethics, it is not so much of whether you have a duty, whether it's based on consequences. It is actually, the emphasis is actually on the person, less and less on the activity. The argument of virtue ethics theory is that if we develop people to become virtuous people, then it is natural that whatever decision that they will take will also be ethical. Okay? So if somebody is good, all things being equal, it is good that will come out of the person. If somebody is bad, you can have all the laws, you can have all the regulations, the person will still be bad. So the emphasis of virtue ethics is on the person or the actor and not so much about the consequences or duty or reward for a particular decision. I hope that point is clear. So instead of emphasizing on doing good things, there is a focus on being a good person. And the logic is that if you become a good person, you will automatically do good things. Okay? So the theory says we should focus on becoming good people. And once we become good people, we will not need laws, we will not need policies. It will naturally come to us to behave in the right way. Let's look at the criticisms of this theory. Point 1 says virtues are not enough for enhancing social welfare, which depends on some right overt action. So what the first criticism is that when it comes to building society, societal welfare, we need people that will actually take some actions to improve society. Okay? So the fact that you are a good person doesn't necessarily translate that you will do something to improve the welfare of society. I think that makes sense, right? So you may be somebody who doesn't kill, you don't insult, you don't abuse others, but that is good anyway. It's a virtuous life, but that by itself cannot lead to the enhancement of society. We need those that will go do charity work, give donations to orphanage, build schools, build roads, all the social responsibility things that we know about. Okay, so if we have good people, yes, they are good, but if they don't take any action, that will not lead to the promotion of the welfare of society. All right. The next criticism says, at times, it becomes very difficult to distinguish between virtues and values. And to that extent, virtue ethics loses its importance as a separate branch of ethics. So when we're explaining virtues, I think after values, we went to virtues. And I told you that basically the values are the same as virtues. You'll normally practice them over time when they become part of you, then they are considered to be virtues or things that you hold dear. Okay, so because of that, virtue ethics cannot be seen as a distinct, separate of ethics. It is always roped into values because most of the examples of virtues are also the same examples for values. Okay. Then the last one, I hope so, virtues may be looked upon as vice. Okay, so it depends upon the community, the generation within which you find yourself, the society that you find yourself. Certain things that are certain traits and behavior that may be considered as virtues may be considered as vice in some other places or in some other generations. Okay, so for instance, in Aristotle's Greece, humility was a vice, but to Christians it was a virtue. So during the period of Aristotle, if you were a humble person, it was considered to be a weakness. Okay, those days the rulers and the kings, you have to be pompous, you must be proud. Okay, and pride was considered to be a virtue. Okay, at the same time, Christians were admonished to be humble. All right, so for the same humility, if you were in Aristotle's Greece, the humility will be considered as a vice or a bad thing to have. But if you were also a Christian, it will also be deemed as a virtue. Okay, so the same thing could either be seen, could be looked upon as a vice instead of a virtue. Okay. Then we have a man may possess some virtues, yet he may be a bad man. I don't know why we are using man, because men are bad. All right. So are women. So and this criticism is very, very important. Because what happens is that most of the time we judge people based on one trait, okay? And we don't look at the other things. So the person can use just one aspect of his life to deceive you, and you will not know about the other side, okay? And most of the time we see it, especially among the religious folks as well. They come to church, they are all pious, and so especially the females, you tend to trust them a lot. You want to get into business with them, you send them your money, but you didn't know that it was just a display in the church, all right? The person is dubious, he's a crook, and yet when it comes to church, the way he behaves is as if he's an angel, all right? So the traits or the values or the virtues, one may have the other and may not have the other, all right? So somebody may be very hardworking, and the hardworking, if you don't take time, you might think it is the same as being honest. Okay, like one of my teaching assistants, very, very hardworking guy, but he managed to get access to my password. And even when he finished his service, he was able to get into my mail and leak my questions to students. And it became a big, big issue. Right now, he's not even sure. We are not sure whether they will give his set to him or they will recall it back. Okay, so you can just look at one trait of a person and conclude that because the person is like this, then he's a good person throughout. And that could spell your doom. That is the other criticisms of this virtue ethics theory. Okay. Then virtue ethics fails to address the dilemma that arises in applied ethics. For instance, in the case of abortion, virtue ethics does not give any direction. So virtue ethics, as we've seen, is basically, it argues that we should develop morally right people. As to whether what that means, what they should do, they should refrain from do, this part theory does not give any clues to that. Okay, so when it comes to abortion, if you go to say deontological theory, all right, it is a sense of duty. For example, it argues that thou shalt not kill. And so if that is the position of deontology and you believe in that, you have the view that irrespective of how the pregnancy came about, you have a duty not to destroy another life. All right? If we were to take the teleological theory, which consists of consequentialism and what again? Utilitarianism. Okay. The person who takes that view will now have to make the decision. What are the consequences for this abortion? All right. What are the benefits? Probably I was raped by an armed robber. I don't want to give birth to the son of an armed robber. Or I have some health complications. And so if I don't abort, I might die with this baby and so on and so forth. So that theory helps the person who is in such a situation to be able to make a decision. But when it comes to virtue ethics, there is no direction. All what the theory says is be a good person. What does being a good person mean? All right. Does it mean abort? Does it mean not to abort? What about the circumstances surrounding the pregnancy? So while the earlier two ethical theories gives a clue and helps people to be able to make decisions, virtue ethics doesn't give any such directions. Okay. So any questions so far on the theories, the main theories governing ethics? So we've seen three of them: deontology, teleological theory, which then is divided into two: utilitarianism and which one again? Consequentialism. Okay, utilitarianism coming from utility or benefit, consequentialism coming from the consequences of your decisions. And the last theory we've looked at now is known as the virtue ethics theory. Okay. Any questions?